Hi, my name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church, and for those who are disillusioned. This podcast series is to encourage via conversation and not necessarily change your mind prior to listening. You can contact us as well by email, ogc@accessradio.biz, biz is spelled B-I-Z. Check out our Facebook page, Off-Grid Christianity, and we have our own website now, offgridchristianity.co.uk. So please enjoy today's guest, who started his career in marketing and worked in business for companies like 3M and RHM. That's Rankhovis McDougall to you and me. A change of career in 1996 saw our guest get ordained before being the coordinating prison chaplain in Nottingham for 10 years, 8 months and 2 days, which sounds like a sentence in itself, doesn't it? He then became a vicar in Leamington Spa. In 2017, he learned more about the 3 S's, Sun, Sea and Sangria, as pastor of TCF, Torre Vista Christian Fellowship, on the Costa Blanca, where he has overseen not only a name change to Salt Church, but also by a new church building and church plant as well. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to Off-Grid Christianity today, Chris Knight, the 3 S's, Sun, Sea and Sangria. Love it.
Indeed, no, absolutely. No, it's really good to meet you, Martin, and good to be here this morning.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Right, let's go for it, sir, if that's okay.
Yep. Have a go.
The 5 questions. Let's see how you get on. Question number 1. If you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask them questions, who, good sir, would it be?
Well, I have to say, Martin, that these 5 icebreaker questions have caused me an awful lot of thinking. Just before we came on air this morning, that I've managed to answer number 1, the history one. There's so many amazing people. For me, actually, maybe surprisingly or not, it would be Charles Darwin, I think. Very controversial figure, but I think I'd like to have a chat with Charles Darwin.
I think that's a brilliant answer. Why have you chosen him?
Well, I think he changed so much in the world. He changed so much in the view of where we've come from, in the view of God or creation and all these sorts of things. But he himself said if there wasn't a lot of evidence, then he would change his theory. So I'd like to have a chat with him, bring him a bit up to date with some of the latest evidence and see what he would think of his theory in the light of new discoveries in the 21st century.
That is brilliant. He died an agnostic, I think, didn't he, at best?
There's various answers to that. I mean, there's something about a deathbed conversion or, there's various issues surrounding how he did end up. But he had a pretty tough life. Lots of things happened. He started off in a seminary thinking very much about God. And I think he got probably rather angry along the way. But either way, he noticed all these things and he came up with his theory, which is still only a theory. But it'd be interesting to see what he thought, in the light of all the new technology and all the new discoveries, particularly DNA and stuff like that in the 21st century. But it's still a theory, isn't it? I think anything like that, it's very hard to absolutely prove it. It annoys me slightly that it's taught as an actual fact when perhaps there are other answers to that question. So it'd be interesting to see whether he would actually change what he thought if we had a good discussion with him.
Yeah. Actually, I'm just going to go off track a bit and just tell you a little story, if that's all right.
Yeah.
1993, oh dear, all those years ago, I went because I ended up going skiing on an Oakhall skiing holiday.
Right.
As we were on the flight, the lady who sat next to me, obviously I like to have a chat, and it turned out she was not only Swiss, but she was a lecturer. So consequently I said, what do you lecture in? She says, everything post-Darwin. I'm a Darwinist. And I was going, well, that's interesting. I'm a creationalist, you see.
Right, yes.
And she said, well, as far as she was concerned, she would go all to the creationist meetings because at the end of the day, it's just a theory. And I went, not according to the BBC, it's not, and all that sort of stuff. She said, well, no, you've got to. That's how it works. So we have interesting debates. Well, as the plane came into land and we taxied to the terminal building, obviously I got up and pulled down her fur coat, you see, and it fell down onto her head. I said, I'm really sorry about this. Here's your coat. And somebody from like 3 or 4 rows back shouted out, I think that's a post-Darwin coat. And I'm going, did you hear our conversation? He said, I think the whole plane did.
And passions can rise, can't they, on such topics? But
yeah. It was like the way you and I were talking. There was
Yeah.
no
Oh, that's
animated
brilliant.
conversation or anything. It was brilliant.
Ah,
So if that lady's
excellent.
listening, hello. That's a great answer, Darwin. Thank you. I'd actually like to be in that conversation. Let me know. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable, please?
I mean, that one was a bit easier for me. It'll be Abraham.
Ah,
I studied quite a lot, as you might gather. And of course, he's the father of faith, and he was an amazing character, and he did some incredible things. So, yeah, my favorite Bible character is Abraham, who became Abraham.
I don't think we've had him for yonks and yonks and yonks. So it's a
Okay.
nice change. Question 3. If you were Prime Minister for the day and could change any law or impose new law, what would it be, sir?
Yes, that was a really tough one. I mean, I suppose there's so many things, but something that's quite topical I picked up in the news. I would probably change inheritance tax.
Oh, tell us more.
But there's a logic to that. I think a lot of Middle England in the UK, I mean, house prices have gone up enormously. People look to their houses as their pensions or whatever.
Yep.
I'm probably a low tax man. That might give some things away, but the only thing I could think of at the time was the inheritance tax, changing that, abolishing it, or changing the threshold,
Very good.
lifting more people out of it, because I think a lot of Middle England could get hit by it.
Excellent. Good answer. And of course, Middle Scotland, Middle Wales, and Middle Northern Ireland as well.
Yes, I did mean, of course, Great Britain. Absolutely, of course.
Well, yeah, but you're living in Spain, aren't you, sir, at the moment?
Well, I mean, I'm forgetting so much. I've been here for 6 years, so it's amazing how you forget words and all sorts of things. It starts to change you.
You're doing very well with your English, I have to say.
Well, okay, thank you. It might drop off a bit later on with a hard question.
You are also allowed to have a frivolous answer, if you've got one.
I'm really not a frivolous. I find it very hard to be frivolous unless it just comes out naturally. So if I do too much thinking, I guess I'm a bit on the serious side. But it's great to have a joke as well.
Yeah.
But my brain just shut down on these questions. These are so difficult, icebreaker questions, but they're pretty tricky.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question 4, outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out, please, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, obviously living in Spain gives different opportunities, and spent a number of days down in Granada at the Alhambra Palace, and going around, looking at all the Jewish quarters in Granada. It's a golden era in Spain where actually the religions actually got on pretty well for quite a long time. But Granada is an incredible place. The Muslim Alhambra Palace, the architecture is outstanding. Right at the base of the Sierra Nevada, so you come out and you just see the creation of God, towering over Granada. It's been a really great place. Recommend it to anyone. Wow. But a fantastic place to go and visit.
Wow. What people forget when you say, for instance, all the classic spaghetti Western films of the 1960s, people think they were all filmed in Italy, but actually most of the outdoor sequences were filmed in Spain.
They were down that area in the desert, and they were all filmed in Spain. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, sir. The final question. What has been your most embarrassing moment to date, please?
Yes. Well, I mean, I've written down here, that's too embarrassing to talk about. So maybe that's my frivolous answer.
I'll take the second most embarrassing moment then.
Well, that's also too embarrassing to talk about.
Well, no one else is listening. It'll be fine.
I was preaching in Leamington Spa, and I got all excited about what was going on in heaven, what was actually happening around the throne of God, or the worship and the singing. And I started saying, and there were thongs and thongs of angels. And of course, I obviously meant to say there were throngs, throngs and throngs of angels. So that was one very embarrassing moment, but everybody laughed, and that was quite good. If you want a second one, I do have one that's just popped into my mind. It also is to do with church. My very first communion service at St. Mary's in Leamington, the table is all laid out, and I'm not the best at knowing what goes where and all that sort of stuff. I'm quite low church. So I came to the cup, and I poured the wine into the cup, and people I could tell were looking a bit funny. Anyway, I poured the wine in the cup, and my helper passed me some bread, and so it came for me to pass him the cup to drink the communion wine, and he refused to drink it. And I said, "What? What's going on?" I had poured the wine in the base of the cup because it was upside down on the table, and it had about 150 years worth of rubbish and crud, and it was disgusting. And I looked down and I realized what I'd done. Everyone was laughing. And then it was a case, well, what do I do with the wine? So I looked at him and he just said, drink it, drink it. So I drank it. I mean, I'm still alive to tell the story, but I couldn't give him communion after that. Everyone was just laughing. It was just so funny.
Would you like the clean wine or the dirty wine, sir, madam?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, that is cracking. Well, Chris, thank you very much indeed. What a life you've had to date so far. I don't know where to start, really. How about, as Julie Andrews would say, right at the very beginning?
Go for it.
Let's talk about your early years. And what was it like being a Christian in business? We mentioned 3M earlier on, which I think stood for, was it Minnesota Mining something or other?
It is, yeah, the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company. I actually became a Christian on my year out from university.
Oh, wow.
I was working for 3M at the time. And it was about 6 months into it that I actually became a Christian. But 18 months before, at the beginning of my second year at university, I had quite a bad car accident. I wasn't a Christian, obviously. I was in my sports car with a mate. We'd been out to a party. And on the way home, I just decided, oh, why not turn the car over in a ditch? Bit of a silly thing to do.
Yeah.
And the car got flattened. I was a Meatloaf fan at the time, so Bat Out of Hell was playing, and the music was going like a bat out of hell, you'll be gone when the morning comes. Here we were upside down in a flattened sports car. We were still alive, actually, because we didn't have the over-shoulder seatbelt on, so our heads could actually crash down. And I remember the next day, I was going back to university on the train. I was probably going into shock. I was smoking away in the compartment on my own. And I looked out at the world, bearing in mind, at that time, I was an ardent Darwinian evolutionist. I looked out at the world and I could see crisp blue sky. A tree is a tree, a cow was a cow, a sheep was a sheep, a hedge was a hedge. And I looked at it through different eyes. And I suddenly thought, do you know what? There must be a creator.
Yeah.
And that just popped into me. And I remember praying my first prayer, a proper prayer as a non-Christian. I said, if there's a God, then I'm glad that I'm alive. If you exist, I give you permission to find me. And if it's true, then I'll follow you all the days of my life. And that's a dangerous prayer, because within 2 hours, I'm back at university, and some acquaintances, I didn't really know them that well, but they came banging on the door and they said, Chris, we've been praying for you, and we think that there's something gone badly wrong. Are you okay? Well, I was looking at them with an open door. I said, what on earth are you talking about? They said, well, we've been praying to Jesus and we think something's happened. I said, well, actually, yeah, I've had a very bad car accident. I think you're a bunch of nutters. And I just shut the door. I literally shut the door, slammed it in their face, sat on my bed. And that's when I burst into tears as the shock was coming out. And that was the start. And then everywhere I went after that, I just heard the name of Jesus. So it got very confusing. So I ran away to 3M and I thought, I've got away with it. I can put all this behind me. I can get back into, fast cars, earning money, living life. Do you mind it being a longish story?
No.
But what happened was we were throwing a party at the house. I was actually the signature, so I felt responsible for a student house. It got a bit noisy, so the police came out and they raided us. And I ran around the place and I'm saying, I went everywhere, all over the party. Get your clothes on, flush that down the toilet, whatever you're doing. You need the police are here.
Yeah.
Ran down the stairs, and at the door was a very attractive woman police officer and her sergeant. And that very attractive woman police officer is now my wife. And she was a Christian in the police force. And I bumped into her a couple of weeks later. We managed to piece the story together. One thing led to another. And she did the thing she should never have done. She said, if you come to church, I'll go and have a drink with you in a pub. So I went to church chasing a woman, and I found God. I found God in the church. So, it's a bit of a story, but I heard, people being very real about life and death, being very real about history. I started checking it all out, and I found myself actually coming to a state of believing it was true. So my prayer on the train, if there's a God, I give you permission to find me. 18 months later,
wow,
I became a Christian, and he found me. So, and I'm married to the copper who raided my party.
Oh, that's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. I have a feeling you've told that story 100 of times.
Yeah. I mean, it's my testimony, and that has been told a lot over the years. Yeah, of course. You're quite right.
Well, I've got another question for you as a result of that. What's the number one question people ask you as soon as you finish that story?
Actually, that's a good question, because quite often there's sort of quite a lot of silence. And actually, I can't think that there is a normal question that people ask. It's not like there's a standard question. They might pick up on different aspects of the story. Quite often it might go into the creation, and is there a God? How do you know there's a God? And what happened at the precise moment you became a Christian? So we unpack that a little bit. And it does lead into some very interesting conversations. But there's not like one response from people.
Oh, well, you disappoint me, Mr. Bond.
Well, I apologize for that. But there's not a standard question that people ask.
This is where you turn around and say, well, what do you think is a standard question, Martin?
Well, what do you think then is a standard question, Martin? What question would you ask?
What sports car did you have at the time when you crashed it?
There you go. It was a Triumph Spitfire Mark IV. It was white. I forgot to put lead in the boot. That was the problem. With one of those cars, they're a bit light and bouncy, and you need to weigh down the back end, and then it stays on the road better.
Is that true?
It is true. It's absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true. That's what you need to do with a Triumph Spitfire Mark IV.
Wow.
But I learned that too late, didn't I?
You did. And because you weren't wearing proper seat belts.
Yeah.
So it was the standard one that you pull from your right shoulder down. It was that standard seat you had. So you could lean forward as opposed to the harness type.
That's right. So it didn't stop us. Otherwise it would have broken our necks and everything. I mean, we were completely doubled up in the well of the car. I mean, literally completely doubled up. I only had a small scar as the windscreen came down. It just nicked my cheek, but it could have sliced my head off. So, me and my friend were very fortunate. But I felt so responsible. Obviously, that's why I started going into shock.
Absolutely. Your friend, whatever happened to him then?
I don't know now. We sort of parted ways throughout university, but I became a Christian, shared the gospel with him. I don't know where he is at the moment. We've lost touch. We have lost touch. Life does that. We go different paths.
This would be great if I could say, well, you're not going to believe it, but he's here tonight. Would you please welcome?
Well, it would be, but you never know. I don't know.
Not yet, anyway.
Life is like that, isn't it?
Yeah. I had the privilege of going out to America a couple of times to do loads of interviews. And one church person that we were staying with took us to his friend, who was the son of the most famous evangelist America's ever brought out of the country. Can't give any names. Billy Graham comes to mind. Anyway, it was his son.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah.
This is going back about nearly 30 years ago now. And he was speaking up front, regaining his stories of when he was at university in America.
Yeah.
And he had a sports car trying to show off to young ladies and everything else like that. And it was a bright yellow Triumph Spitfire.
There you go.
And he took the mickey out of it. How dare he do that in front of a Brit? So unfortunately, the only thing I can remember is that backstage afterwards, we were invited backstage to meet him. And my boss who was with us presented him with a Bible from England, Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland. I then said, you can't take the mickey out of a Triumph Spitfire. I put him right. It might have been rubbish, but it's our rubbish.
Well, it functions fine with more weight in the boot.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
They're lovely cars, Triumph Spitfires. Absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
So that was that then. Eventually, you go obviously to Bible college, I would have thought, in order to become a vicar.
Yes, yeah. I worked for about 7 years in 3M and off to marketing in Rankovers McDougall's, which was
Yeah.
great. Really enjoyed it. But we moved to a small village in Oxfordshire, and I just believed in supporting the local church. So we went to the local church, which was an Anglican church,
Yeah.
and met a great bunch of people, serious about God, and joined the church. Very, very small, but I started running a Bible study. I started getting interested in reading and studying the Bible more. So through that process, started to feel, actually, what do I want to do with my life? I mean, I
Yeah.
really enjoyed marketing, but it just felt there was more value trying to get the gospel out to people, eternal value stuff. Not that we're not trying to do that, when we're working. I mean, I was trying to do that when I was working. Your question, what was it like being a Christian in the workplace? Actually, it was quite difficult because you always come up against some ethical question somewhere. I remember an agency came and they wanted to do a promotion. You write a brief for a promotion. Agencies came back and they wanted to do tarot cards and they wanted to do all these types of things in a promotion. And I said, not on my watch. And they said, you can't do that. I said, well, actually, yeah, I'm the marketing manager. It's my budget. We're not doing it. It became quite unpopular, because people didn't fully understand why I was saying no. So you get into some great debates, but, people can rise up over the strangest of things.
Yeah.
But there was no way I was going to do a promotion, under my watch concerning tarot cards and anything like that. I just don't think that's helpful.
About 30 years ago again, or 25 years ago, had the privilege of interviewing a very well-known radio station at the time, or still is very well-known radio station, the chairman. And, he had to make an executive decision as a Christian. And the first thing he did on day one was to get rid of the horoscope phone-in that they had.
Yeah.
Immediately, so you can't do that. We're getting so much money in and everything else. He said, no, it's going. And it did. And they didn't have any complaints, if I remember rightly. And in fact, I think the money actually went up in the end on something else. So it's amazing if you stand your ground.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's brilliant. Being a Christian, just living as a Christian it's a challenge. I mean, so many people have said to me, oh, being a Christian, it's a crutch, it's to get you through life. And I'm going, well, actually being a Christian is one of the hardest things I've ever done in the sense of having to live, forgiving one's enemies, having to struggle with actually not headbutting someone, before I was a Christian, I might do stuff like that, or I might take someone aside and get, it's not an easy way of life. It can be extremely challenging. Yeah, I've had quite a lot of that.
Well, that's what I'd like to focus in on, if that's all right. Rather than do a This Is Your Life, Chris Knight.
Yeah, go for it, yes.
I just want to put a little flag coming up here. If you're of a certain age and you think, well, I haven't got a girlfriend yet, what Chris is saying sounds very, very good. That does not mean that in order to go out with a Christian policewoman, you go and do something stupid, right? I'm just saying that.
Yeah, correct.
There are other ways.
No, most definitely.
Just ask her out for a start.
No, most definitely. I mean, life is life, isn't it? No, life happens, and you're just you're responding to what goes on, what hits you.
Exactly, because you might get arrested, and of course, you might end up in prison. This is a good link, isn't it?
Yes, it's a very good link.
This is what I'd like to focus in on now, because I really picked up on the fact that you've obviously been counting the number of days, weeks, and months and years that you're a prison chaplain. 10 years, 8 months, and 2 days.
Yeah.
In light of the fact that you've seen the other side of life as well, from people you've walked with in prison, what was your time like there, first of all? And then we'll expand on that, if that's okay.
Yes. First of all, I love being a prison chaplain. It's incredibly rewarding. The challenges are I had to oversee the freedom of all religions operating in the prison. And of course, all religions do not agree with one another. And so, I was having to manage a multi-faith kind of team. And that can be very tricky, and certain things can happen and issues can crop up, and they need managing. So, as a trained manager, my marketing, my administrative degree really helped in trying to work through all of that. So, people have a right, they have a right in the country. So you try to leave the religious differences behind and just facilitate the right. But inevitably, I was always in debates, fantastic debates with lots of different religious people, which helped me learn an awful lot about
Yeah.
where they're coming from and for them to learn about Christianity. But being in prison, it was a private prison, privately run. We had prisoners who were queuing up to come to us. They wanted to come to our prison because, being a private prison, we had to entertain, well, not entertain them, they had to be busy for 35 hours a week. So they had to do education, they had to be out of the cell. We were training them in electrics, in gas, they were being educated and they were being very productive. So they weren't banged up behind doors for very long at all. It was trying to normalize life. And in the chaplaincy, we were able to break new ground. We even did family services. We managed to get their wives or their partners and their kids to come into the chapel. And that was breaking very, very new ground at the time. And so we did lots of things, trying to support prisoners, trying to support their families, to rehabilitate. So that's what the whole thing was about. So it was a great 10 years, 8 months, and 2 days. It was very, very challenging. I was squashed an awful lot.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you get caught in the middle of things. So the way a regime works, they want to work through one person. So they want to work through the full-time chaplain, which was me. So I'm having to help resolve all the other issues that are cropping up with all the other religions. And I have to say, at the time in the prison, we were having a rising population of a particular religion that was impacting on how the prison was running, and I'm having to try to point out to the regime some of the dangers of all of that, and that was quite politically difficult.
Yes,
that's where it can be actually quite hard, particularly if you feel that one religion is being favored more than another.
Yeah.
I have to say, it did feel that Christianity was the one religion that was losing out more than most.
In what way?
We couldn't have all of our religious festivals in the way that other religions could have theirs. There were difficulties being mixed up in the country and the understanding of what Christianity is. So, I mean, one example is I just informed people that Jesus wasn't born on the 25th of December, and they were absolutely shocked and surprised, and they thought I'm a heretic, because in prison, everybody celebrates Christmas. Everyone celebrates Christmas on the wings. Everyone gets Christmas dinner. But we wanted something special for the Christian lads. We wanted the Christian lads to have their own Christmas.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of work for the regime. However, it's their Christmas, and we should be allowed to celebrate it as believers, not just stuck on a wing with everybody else. So that caused a lot of aggravation, and it took a couple of years before we were allowed to do that. And that's when you feel you're being a bit squeezed, or you're letting your lads down. If you can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I can, because, okay, this goes back about 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I had the privilege of going into a couple of prisons voluntarily to go and interview people, not for any other reason. And I got the impression that the chapel was always open and you're always welcome in there at any time. Maybe I've got that wrong.
Yeah, different prisons run differently.
Right.
And so you're under an overarching kind of body of people who are running that prison. So we had specific times when the chapel was open. We could bring people up, if there'd been a death in their family, we would bring them to the chapel. But no, we had specific times. And one of the biggest things I had to oversee was the transference. I mean, in the days when I was in the transition between having a chapel and having a separate multi-faith room, in our prison, it was quite small, and there was a massive growing population of a particular religion. So the regime decided to turn the chapel into a multi-faith room. Well, that caused an awful lot of difficulty, and that was very hard to manage. So for lots of different reasons, and again, being the person trying to sort it out, you get yourself squashed. I'm pretty sure that multi-faith rooms or chapels have probably disappeared from prisons now. I don't know, but at the time there had to be a chapel because it's the religion of the land, and everyone else would meet in their own multi-faith room for everybody else. But under my watch, they were merged together, which was difficult.
What about your faith at the time then? How was that struggling? Or maybe it wasn't?
Two things on that. Number one, when you're being crushed, you feel persecuted. So you're having those issues to cope with. You might, be angry in yourself, but you've got to be a Christian and do it the right way. So that caused tensions personally. But my utter belief in the Lord Jesus Christ as being the way, the truth, and the life strengthened absolutely massively. The more I learned about all the different religions, what they stand for, how they function, how they operate, Jesus just stood out above everything else, so high that, it was obvious to me that the absolute truth is in Jesus Christ. So it strengthened my faith from that point of view, whilst at the same time, you're really struggling with certain injustices that are happening that you don't really have power to overcome.
So how'd you come to the conclusion, right, this is how I go ahead with it then? How'd you do it?
Yeah, I mean, halfway through, I was there at the 5-year mark. I was there and it was really getting difficult. And I was thinking, I think I've had enough of this and we'll leave now. My wife also worked in prison. She was a volunteer. She did some amazing things with Prison Fellowship, and we used to do restorative justice courses. But Helena was sort of doing most of those things. But at the halfway point, I thought, well, I want to leave because this is too pressured, and I can't see a way forward. And then Helena just happened to say, well, if there was a way forward, would you stay? Because she loved prison. She loved the lads, she would walk the wings and she was running stuff. So I said, well, look, okay, if we get a new multi-faith room, if the pressure starts to ease, if we're allowed to do more things as Christians, I'll stay for 10 years. I'll stay another 5 years. And we've got to be careful what you say to God, because literally 3 weeks later, and I knew nothing about this, literally 3 weeks later, the prison was going to double in size. They were going to build a brand new multi-faith room, which was much bigger, much better, and we were allowed to do many more things. So in the last 5 years, that's when we were doing all the amazing things. It opened up, and that's why I stayed 10 years, 8 months, and 2 days. I fulfilled my commitment to God. I said I'd stay 10 years, and I did.
So what would you say to people at the moment then who are going through similar but obviously different circumstances, because not everyone listening today would have thought it's a prison officer, let alone a chaplain. But, where the pressure's on them at the moment, in light of what you've just shared there, what would you say to them?
Obviously, I can only give some top line indications. It was a lot worse than I'm able to say, really. But I think the first thing is you need a lot of support. So you need people you need people who you can trust, who you can talk to. I have to say, we had a fantastic diocese up in Nottingham, and the Church of England came in, and I would have reviews with them, and you do various questionnaires because they're trying to find out exactly how are you doing. And on my questionnaire, It came out a little bit like this guy needs an awful lot of help. So immediately they actually got a life coach. They assigned a life coach to me immediately. I would go once a week for about 10 weeks, actually. And I went and saw the life coach, who was able to open my eyes and take me out of the narrowness of the pressure and enable me to see a wider world. And it's at that time I started painting again. So I started having more hobbies. I started trying to do different things outside of work to bring a better balance to mental health, a better balance of my motivation. It was a very testing time for lots of reasons, but I came through it, and those types of things really, really helped. Yeah, so you need good people. You need to be able to talk about it. You need to break out of the narrow view that you get trapped in, and you need to do different things.
It's interesting you mentioned life coach, because I suppose another name for that would be spiritual director.
Yes, I had one of those as well.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah, but there's kind of different disciplines. I think, spiritual director is great. Yes, you pray, you're bringing your faith into things, which is incredibly important. And I had lots of friends. I was part actually of the ground level network up in Lincoln, the ground level network of churches. And, once a month I would go and join with all the pastors. They'd have a monthly meeting. I was in a small group with seasoned pastors. So they became my spiritual directors. So I had quite a lot of support. But I have to say, you need both, I think. You need some spiritual direction, but having a life coach breaks you out into doing more in life that actually builds you up and takes you out of the trapped mindset that you're in.
Yeah. You and I are obviously of a certain age. So
We
if
are.
we go
Yes.
if we go back 30 or 40 years, if we ever had an American coming over and been on TV, being interviewed, they'd often talk about, well, my therapist says this. I can't do an American accent, obviously. And you know full well that in the press the following day, they'd be saying, oh, yet another American comes over, therapist. What do we know about it? But it proves that therapy does work. So for those that are trapped at the moment, here is your 1 minute sell for why you like life coaches and spiritual directors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when trouble comes to everybody, you're not immune from life's troubles. Whoever you are, whatever you believe, trouble comes. But when it becomes unbearable, then you must break out of the mold. There's no shame in asking for help. Find the right people, find the right place, find people that you trust, and go and talk and seek the help that you need. If you need to see a GP, then obviously there's that route. I found the life coach, the spiritual people who are around me, they managed to see me through.
Brilliant. Thank you. And if you haven't heard episode 50, which is with Peter Mockford, who is a very well-known, well, maybe not so well-known, but top of his game when it comes to psychotherapy and everything else, we did what I consider to be a really good podcast, and it's called Prayer and Mental Health, or as I brilliant. Subtitled it, I can't possibly have mental health issues because I'm a Christian. Have a listen to that and let us know what you think about it as well. And that's to people listening today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going back then to the prison very quickly.
Yeah.
How did you cope with people when you started to find that they were opening up to you and you realised they had some serious trouble past and obviously created trouble as well? How did you cope with that?
You can't be a prison chaplain. Actually, in my personality profile, I'm quite high on judgment. I'm quite high on judging or what is right and wrong. I have a great sense of right and wrong. When you're dealing with people who know they've done wrong, they're in prison, they've been caught, then I had a policy of not really wanting to know exactly what they've done, so that I wouldn't prejudge them, so that I could get to know them, I could make my own mind up, so that, they would be able to talk to me without me knowing everything about them. Obviously, with some people you had to know, but I tried to approach people exactly the same. My job wasn't really to judge the past. They're being judged, they're in prison. What I was about was trying to reform them as people, trying to share the gospel of Jesus with them so that they could have a heart change and a life change. And actually, obviously, my aim was to help people become Christians. Lots of people used to come to the chapel and they would be doing their little drug deals on the back row, but there was always a strong gospel message. And there's a number of amazing guys from different parts of the world, actually, who slowly moved forward from the back row and who ended up on the front row and who became Christians. We used to bring a birthing pool into the prison to baptize them. So we'd bring a birthing pool in. This is all happening in the last 5 years because it all opened up. But we used to bring a birthing pool in, baptize them by full immersion. And actually a number of these guys, a lot of them are now out of prison. They've done their time. But a lot of them still see some of them on Facebook in different parts of the world. They're still Christians. They're still going on with God. It's good to think or to feel you've really helped someone get their life together.
I had the privilege of interviewing in my previous career in a radio station a gentleman by the name of Chris Lambriano, and I must contact him.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know, Chris.
You know him, do you?
Well, yes, I've met him a number of times. He's been into our prison, yeah,
Oh, wow. Well,
going back a long time because I've been out of it now for
yeah.
10, 15 years. So yeah, we met Chris Lambriano. Yeah,
He very kindly drove all the way out from London
yeah,
to the radio station in Stoke-on-Trent to be with me. For those who have never heard who he is, he worked for the Krays.
he did.
And if
Yeah,
you don't know who the Krays are, Kray, Google it, and then you realise just how the Krays in London ran London in like the mid-60s for some time. And he was one of their henchmen, I think that's fair to say. But anyway, Chris, he said when he was in prison, he needed roll-ups and he would use the Bible because it was very thin paper and was ideal
yes.
for making cigarettes. And I'm just wondering, therefore, how many Bibles did you have left after that had pages missing?
No, it's a well-known fact. They used to do that. They used to even gather up the dust around cells and roll it up in the Bible. Actually, I know a great Christian guy. One lad who was a Christian. He was evangelizing, or he was just sharing Jesus on his wing. So one day they actually got out before he came out of his cell. They were all out. They bricked him in with Bibles. So they bricked his cell door up with Bibles. Anyway, over the next sort of 4 months or so, he handed every single Bible back to every single person on the wing. So he was getting pressured, but he responded really well. You get all these stories, all these things happen. Lots of things happen.
Could have been a lot worse, couldn't it? But the fact that they bricked him up with a Bible or two.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, there's really serious things that happen in prison, most of which I couldn't talk about anyway.
No, absolutely.
But, stuff happens. It's a rough and tumble place. Yeah, I don't want people to think that prison is really easy, but there's good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes, which is a nice link back to
our
talk earlier on about a certain film. Very good. Well, listen, thank you for sharing that, because obviously you then decide after 10 years, 8 months and 2 days, that's it. You feel God wants you to move on, and you end up in Royal Leamington Spa, as some people call it, or Leamington Spa, as other people call it. How different of a culture change was that for you then?
Well, that was a huge, huge shock, because all of a sudden I'm standing in front of a church, and there are ladies in the congregation. It was a real shock. I'm seeing all these ladies on the first Sunday, which I hadn't been used to. I'd been used to like 50, 60 tough guys. And then all of a sudden there were a lot of children running around. So it was a bit of a culture shock, but it's amazing how you can move forward quite quickly, how, the past becomes the past and you focus on the present. So, it probably took a good 3 or 4 months to really kind of start settling in. But, the management skills that you need, you still use. So there were a lot of things that were the same in management. But I think the biggest shock was seeing ladies in the congregation.
And also making sure that when they left, the Bibles were still there, pages intact.
Yes, you got some of that.
Going back a few minutes, you said, you're very high up on rights and wrongs. Tell me more about what you mean by that, please.
I worked out in prison that there's righteousness, truth, and justice. They're very, very big things, but they need to be balanced with grace, mercy, and forgiveness. I learned out of prison, particularly when you feel you're being bullied by a regime or something. There's right and wrong, but then there's grace and forgiveness. And in mental health terms, when I started to learn more about how to show grace and true forgiveness, it does help your mental health. Otherwise, you're holding on to my rights to justice. I think as a person, anyway, my personality tends to be there's an ultimate truth. Not all things are true equally. So I've got this thing within me, but I must admit, when I became a Christian, it really kind of switched on quite strongly. There is only one way to the Heavenly Father. It's Jesus Christ. There's only one true gospel. There are many gospels out there, but there's only one true gospel. And so, I tend to look at the world probably, a bit right and wrong, but having to salt and pepper with grace, mercy, and forgiveness, if that is a good answer.
And it's a very good answer.
It's tough being a Christian. Naturally, we just want to be my rights and my way and that sort of thing. So if anyone says to me being a Christian is easy, actually only real men and real women become Christians. It is the real life, but it's a hard life, and we will have trouble in the world. And Jesus said it, and it's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
I have learnt in my Christian faith and in my walk that the way I learn how to go is how others have done it. And I've made an executive decision this week to stop reading all these great Christian books. This is just me personally now.
Yes.
But read books on biographies of Christians to see how they did it.
Yeah.
For those that listen to that, I'd like to ask you a question on this then, because yes, we know about that Jesus came in and completely turned it upside down. So when you think you should be going in and doing this, actually Jesus would be doing the complete opposite.
Yes.
So in your life to date then, give us some examples, please, on how you've realised that actually this is what you should have done in the first place with Jesus, but you went something else.
That is a good question, because in trying to stand up for what is right, and particularly when you feel responsible for other people, I did make what I now consider to be a big mistake. I actually put in a complaint to the regime about a set of issues. Yes, I was justified in that, but it was the wrong way forward. It would have been much better to swallow the pride. It would have been much better to spend a lot of time going to the various people and really working on getting them to listen and to hear and to have an explanation, an engagement. But I suppose, I got to a place where I was so hyped up and frenetic. It was like, this is the last straw, But when those moments come, that's when you really need to sleep on it and don't react. Don't react too hastily. That was what I consider to be a big mistake. By the end of the whole thing, it did sort a few things out, but I do think it could have been done in a more gracious way. But that doesn't mean being a doormat either. This is the tightrope. Christianity is not to be a doormat. We stand up for righteousness and truth, but the way we do it is through loving our enemies. It's through doing good to people, but that demands so much from us as Christians. That's not easy. That's not an easy walk. And we're all going to make mistakes with that. We are. So we mustn't beat ourselves up when we make the mistake, but we can learn from it.
That's a great answer. Thank you. In fact, then, let's very quickly just highlight something else, because you've talked about how you've had to work in a multi-faith room and be aware that obviously you have to look after the other religions and the people that are there. For those that really struggle with, but this person's of another religion, I can't cope with them and all that sort of stuff, what would you say to them?
Right, that is a good question. I had some of my greatest debates with the Muslim imams that were there. I used to have amazing debates with Muslim prisoners, and we could get on really well, and we could have a really good debate. Was it going to change anybody's mind? Maybe not. Although there were a couple of lads who, in my discussions with them as prisoners, they said, Chris, I really want to believe what you're telling me. It just sounds so amazing. But if I did become a Christian, then I would lose my family. I would be cut off from my culture. It could even be worse than that, and particularly in prison, if if a Muslim did become a Christian, for example, then there would be problems. There's going to be some serious trouble.
Yes.
Experienced some of that when people had to be taken out of the prison for their own safety and protection, because that's when it can get pretty rough and tumble. Yeah. So that's when it gets very difficult indeed. But you still try to continue with the debating. You still try to keep people safe, and you can strongly disagree with what other religions are saying. They have no problem disagreeing with me. So you learn to be able to have a robust debate.
That's a great point you just made there. Other religions have no problems with saying that you're talking rubbish about Christianity.
Yeah.
If you can accept that, then just start talking.
Absolutely. One of the things I picked up in the paper is I think a council has decided, we're back on this again. It happened 20 years ago, but a council has decided to remove the word Christmas to be more inclusive.
Yes.
And actually, that's one thing which united all religions in the prison. All of the imams and, Buddhist minister, it didn't matter. All of the ministers were in agreement. You make the country more dangerous if you deny your own religious backgrounds. And if you start removing Christianity from these types of things, actually, you're adding to making things less safe, not more safe, and actually less inclusive, not more inclusive. And that was the wisdom of all of us from all the different religions. This is, Great Britain, has a Judeo-Christian heritage. What they wanted was for us to be equally as strong about Christianity so they could be as strong about their religion. And so if we do down Christianity, it's a big mistake.
Yes.
It is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Now I've been political. I was here saying, got to be careful not to be political.
It's fine as long as you say, in my opinion, you're fine. So just say in my opinion.
Yeah, and it is my opinion.
There you go.
But I can share, it was the opinion of the multi-faith chaplaincy religious leaders that actually all this kind of trying to remove Christianity from stuff is actually the wrong decision for everybody. So that's something that really needs to be debated and thought through properly. But it's cropped up again. I've just read it today. So, it's for me, it's silliness coming back. It's a lack of understanding of what's going on.
Yes. And it's one thing we've learned from history is that we've never learned anything from history.
I'm afraid that is very, very true. Absolutely.
I wish I'd come out with that quote. I can't remember who came out with it first.
Each generation's got to learn all the lessons all over again.
Exactly. To summarize all this then, from the perspective of people who are listening today who really struggle trying to be a Christian at workplace, but there's such and such and such and such who are different religions, what would you say to them?
Well, the immediate thing and my approach was not to be ashamed of the gospel. The gospel is the power of God to salvation to those who would believe. And I think there's this pressure to dumb Christianity down. And I think that's a big mistake. We should not be ashamed of what we believe. We should present it in a really intelligent, good, in a good way, with grace and with mercy. And we would make the whole thing better if we did that. So we shouldn't be hiding or apologizing. We need to know our stuff and we need to think through what is the best way of sharing these things, but not to be frightened or ashamed, because the one thing I've learned is that all other religions, they will fight and stand up for their faith and they will express it when needed. And Christians need to do exactly the same. We must not be ashamed. We must stand up. I mean, with what's going on in the world, not to be too political, but I've been challenged by when you hear about terrible things happening to Christians in other parts of the world. There isn't 100,000 Christians on the streets going to the embassies demanding that country changes. And I do think that with other religions, it doesn't take much for everybody to come out and to stand up for what they believe in. I think we as Christians should do more of it in the right way,
Yes. And the fact you said the word fight, that's with the small f.
Absolutely.
As in...
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, fight the good fight of faith, isn't it? It's, we are in that situation where we mustn't be ashamed of what we believe.
Yeah. Fighting without guns, ammunition and fists, basically.
No, we fight with love, grace, mercy, forgiveness. We do good to our enemies and we go the extra mile for people. But at the same time, we're not doormats.
I just say to you, and I've said to many other guests in the past, Chris, that, we'll see where we go and where we end up. I haven't even got round to talking about the 3 S's, sun, sea and sangria. I do apologise. We'll have to get you back for another time because I think what you've shared has been phenomenal. But in the remaining 30 seconds before I get to the final question then, tell us more as to why you're in Spain now, please.
I'm in Spain because when my mother died in 2004, I got a small inheritance, which we were able to buy a holiday home. So we wanted a bolt hole to get away from the prison and all these things. So we did all of that. But I came to a church here in Torrevieja over 10 years. Helena, my wife, would sing, I would preach. They got to know us. So when the previous pastor retired, they asked if we would take it over. And cut a long story short, very difficult year making this decision, we decided it was the right thing to do. So we took on the church, and that's why we're in Spain.
The final question, which I ask every single guest as well, because how I've learned is by reading biographies to get my faith going. So,
Yes.
Chris Knight, who is your Christian hero, please?
The person who's had such a big effect on me, particularly as a young Christian, was David Pawson. So David Pawson, he's gone to be with the Lord now, of course. He died at the age of 90. But he did his Bible teaching series on every book of the Bible. And this was coming out as I was starting my journey in Bible study and starting to learn about this amazing book, the Bible, and about Jesus. And so I used to get his tapes once a month. They used to come out, and I used to eat them for breakfast, dinner, and tea, and learned so much from him, and would always be very thankful. And I did meet him once. He came when I was a curate. He came to Banbury as a speaker at an event, and I got mistaken for David Pawson because I had a Morris Minor car. He was well known for his Morris Minor cars.
Oh, Moggy. Okay.
He loved Morris. Yeah, good old Moggy. And so the people at the gate, they were briefed. He's got a Morris Minor car. Nobody else has got a Moggy. So your speaker will turn up in a Morris Minor. Well, I had a Morris Minor that I was doing up. So I turned up, wound the window, and I said, "Oh, hello, Mr. Pawson. Very nice to see you." And I have to say, I laughed my head off, and I had to disappoint them that I wasn't David. But yeah, he's had a big influence on me, and he's a controversial figure as well. But he would stand up for what he believed, and he would have very good arguments as to why he believed what he believed, and I respected him for all of that.
The main thing was his view on once saved, always saved, wasn't it? That was the big talking point in the 70s and 80s.
Absolutely. And he's done quite a few books like that. And he has challenged the church in its thinking. Nowadays, the church is shifting into hyper grace, and all sorts of strange things are going on. Occasionally you need someone like David just to get the thinking back on track.
What else do we know about David Pawson?
Oh, he was an army chaplain. My goodness. And he was in the Middle East as an army chaplain, and he did some quite amazing teaching, which could be now seen as perhaps being prophetic about the state of the world. He did some teaching on some of this, and he'd witnessed a lot in the Middle East himself. I've been a prison chaplain. He'd been an army chaplain. Yeah, I think he came from a farming stock. I think his parents were farmers and things like that. He didn't half know his Bible, and he worked really hard.
David Pawson taught me something massively, actually, that I'd like to end on, because I too met him once very briefly, and he was at an event, and I'd been a Christian for about a month, 2 months, something like that. And I can tell you when it was 1987, and he got off the stage and was obviously going to be escorted out to his car. And as he was coming out, I was really incensed because he was saying about once saved, always saved. And so I stood in front of him politely and said, "Can I ask you a question?" And you could see other people wanted to move me away. And he said, "Well, no, make it quick."
Yes.
And he took time out to do that. That has been very instrumental in my life, as was a few years later, by this time working in Christian radio, I had the pleasure of interviewing again, this time on air.
Oh, wow.
He sent me over his book as well. So the fact he was prepared to spend time, he could have said, "No, I've got my chips to go to in my Moggy."
Yeah, no, he would always give time. He was a very deep thinking person. And yeah, he's challenged the church in various doctrinal areas. He's definitely done that. Lots of people don't like him because of that. But I think, it's good to challenge our thinking and to pull us back to the concepts of the Bible, and not some of the things which are happening in the world today. There's some wacky things going on, isn't there? But that's another story for another time.
It is.
But at least David, he would always try to be biblical and bring things back to biblical principles. Whether you agreed or didn't agree, it's an amazing arguer, wasn't he? A debater is very hard to debate. I've seen many a debate with him, and principles of Bible colleges, and David would always come out on top. He knew his stuff.
And for those that want to find out more about David Pawson, Pawson is spelled Pawson.
It is.
There we go. Or just type in Moggy, which is the nickname from Morris Minor. I'm sure you'll find it that way as well.
Yes, yeah. And of course, he's got a website with loads of free material. So, you can really get some fantastic, really grounding. I mean, his teaching really grounded me in the whole of the Bible and helped me piece a lot of things together. Didn't always agree, but that's fine.
But that's it. Chris, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you.